Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Career Chat Night with Nana here at the University of Toronto. And today we have our guest, our alumni, and my good friend, Dr. Peng Leong, who we graduated together, PhDs together, way back in the good old days. So I will let Peng tell us his career story in about 5 minutes. And then I have some set questions for him, but this is a very casual, open discussion type of hour. So if you want to type in your questions in the chat, I will moderate the chat section so we can get to that. So take it away, Peng. Okay, you're muted for some reason. So
Great, good start. Thanks very much, Nana, for inviting me to this. It's my pleasure to meet everyone and tell you about my very windy career path post my PhD many years ago. So I went straight out of my, so I did a PhD in the Department of Biochemistry in David McClelland's lab, and I studied skeletal muscle, so ryanodine receptor, and looked at excitation, contraction, coupling. So really, general molecular biology PhD. And post the PhD, I knew right away that I wanted to go into industry. So I decided to do an industrial postdoc. So I went to Chiron, started in the postdoc program there, reported directly to the chief scientific officer. So it was a very academic lab, and I'd switched over to studying cancer pathways and mechanisms, and was promoted to scientist pretty quickly, and then decided that I wanted to get off the bench. So I moved into business development at Chiron. And I can go into more what business development is, but in this context, it was looking externally for innovation. So rather than rely on all the work that was being done by Chiron scientists, it was my job to find work that was being done in academia or other companies and bring them into the company. And so I did that for 4 years, and in the meantime got an MBA at University of California, Berkeley, and that kind of opened up a whole bunch of other opportunities to me. So I went into investment banking, and so I did that for about 8 years. So I started at CIBC, and then I moved to another bank called Piper Jaffray. So in that role, I worked with biotech companies primarily, and my job was to find them investors and do their IPOs, make them public companies, get additional investments in order to fund the clinical development of their programs, and also worked in mergers and acquisitions. So if the company wanted to acquire other companies or be sold to companies, but it was still a very scientific role in that all of these companies were kind of leading edge biotech companies in mostly in the San Francisco Bay Area, but across the US. So after having done that for a number of years, decided I wanted to go back into industry. So I joined Merck KGaA as head of Asia business development. So worked in Singapore for a number of years, and then became head of general medicine business development. So then I moved back to Boston. And then at that point, felt like I'd done the research, worked in a biotech company in business development, had done investment banking and finance, and then worked in a multinational pharma company. I felt like I had all of the different pieces in order to look into working for a startup and bringing all of this together. So then I worked for a number of startups, including a company called Kazia, which was focused on oncology. And now I am at a company called BioAge Labs, which is focused on finding the cure for aging, but it's really we're looking to treat age-related diseases. I'd love to tell you more about that company if you're interested. And at this company, I'm the chief business officer. So basically, I'm responsible for everything except going into the lab and actually doing the experiments. So setting strategy and figuring out the scientific direction, which specific diseases. We want to explore getting the money into the company to finance our work, looking for partners, figuring out the market opportunity. So it's a really interesting kind of broad job within a company. So that's 20 years in a few minutes.
Wow, thank you. I'm sure there's tons of questions, but while people are lining up their questions in the chat box, I'm just going to start with, there were some languages that you used that maybe some the scientist folks in the room may not know. So maybe if you can tell the group what an IPO is.
Yeah, so I think we all know, you can invest in your stock portfolio in public companies, and they're listed on the Toronto Stock Exchange or NASDAQ. But the companies have to when they become public is when they're listed in the stock exchange and you can buy shares. So an IPO is an initial public offering. So they would hire a bank in order to take them from being a privately held company to being listed on one of these stock exchanges.
Great. We have a question from Cami. Cami, you want to unmute yourself? Or should I ask the question?
Oh, sure. I can ask it.
Sure.
So my question is, what made you decide to get your MBA after doing your PhD?
Yeah, so the MBA it's a very structured. It was a very structured way to learn about business and strategy, right? So I think it's not absolutely required, and you can kind of learn business on the job. But for me, it was just a good opportunity in a structured way to cover business broadly. So, from things like accounting to strategy, look at market and pricing. So all of those things you might not be able to learn very effectively in a job, but in a 2-year business program, you can kind of cover everything.
So Peng, were you doing that on the side or were you full-time MBA?
No, so I decided that my PhD took so long and I needed to actually work. So Berkeley has a full-time has an evening and weekend MBA program, which is exactly the same as the regular MBA, except you just take the courses in the evening.
So that's probably helpful for people that have jobs and families and trying to.
Yeah. And it was really good because everyone else in that program also had jobs and they were all working in great companies. So when you do the group projects, it's really more real world because people are taking their experience from their current jobs into these projects. And so
nice.
Great way to
and I know that some students that are interested in, an MBA after their graduate degree, most MBAs do require that you have some work experience. And do you find that to be true with the MBAs that you looked at, the programs you looked at?
Yeah, so I think the full-time MBAs required at least a couple years of work experience. The evening and weekend one required more, maybe it might have been 4 years of work experience. And then there's also another kind of MBA, which is an executive MBA, which is even more abbreviated. And then you'd probably need 9 years of work experience for that.
Mm-hmm. And there was another MBA question is, did your company fund your MBA or was it self-funded?
Yeah, I was really lucky that my company funded my MBA because it was, I was in business development already. So it was kind of extension of the learning. Yeah.
Nice perk. Would you recommend a self-funded MBA?
Self-funded anyway. It all depends on your career path, right? So I think everyone in our program agreed that the MBA is really good if you want to change careers, right? So if you're a scientist and you want to stay a scientist, then an MBA might not be that helpful. But if you want to switch into business or make a big transition, then it can be a great catalyst for that. So for instance, I was in business development, my company funded my MBA, but after I switched over to investment banking, and that move would have been much more difficult if I didn't get an MBA.
So the question Alexa has, Alexa, you want to unmute yourself? Do you want to ask?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. I just had a question whether you felt it was more beneficial for a younger scientist to join a larger company compared to a startup, I think you had mentioned that they had a postdoc program that you got involved with. Maybe there's more experienced trainers involved in the company. Do you think that that's a better place to start?
Yeah, so when I was looking at these programs, I wanted to find a company that was doing really the same academic research and the same quality of science that I would have been doing if I went to do an academic postdoc. So the person, my supervisor at the time was the chief scientific officer, but he had a lab at UCSF as well. So it was really, very research focused, basic research project that I was doing. And that might have been just me wanting to make sure I had some kind of optionality in case I decided I did want to go back into academia and I could still do that. But I think that if you've decided that, you really want to get out of academic research and do, find a career in the biotech or pharma industry, then it's probably less important to find that kind of a postdoc. You can probably, find something that's in the type of company and the type of role that you're interested in for your future work. And so there's pros and cons to working for a big company versus small companies. I think, with a small company, you're going to build deeper relationships with people, get to wear a lot of different hats, be exposed to a bunch of different things. Whereas in a big company, there's more opportunity, I think, to get do what I did, which is go from research into a completely different group and have a chance to develop. So, either path is good.
Thank you.
So for me, I'm just going to add my 2 pennies worth. So I was in 2 startups before my role here. And what I liked about startups is that you could kind of wear all the hats. You learn all the different roles. So I was in, research and development on the bench. I was also writing grants. I was, hiring people. I was training technicians. I was involved in client relations and business development. So I got to wear many different types of hats. Whereas if you're in a larger company, it's a little bit difficult to do that all in one day, right? It's like you're kind of in your own department. So that's the difference I find.
But all right, that's what happened to me at Chiron. So I was a scientist. In order to do other things that I wanted to, I actually had to give up that science job and move to business development. Whereas in a small company, you can kind of play have the multiple roles. I mean, I think the other big advantage of the big company too is that you do build a much broader network. So when Chiron was acquired by Novartis, people kind of just went all over and they seeded a whole bunch of different companies. So those people that I met 20 years ago now are still people I keep in touch with, and they're all over the place. And so that's another advantage as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned about, the people along the way. So maybe you could tell students here the sort of the crucial mentors you had that helped shape your career path.
Yeah, so I think at each transition, I had really good mentors, right? So the first one was when I went to Chiron, who's my direct supervisor, who gave me the chance to be a scientist, but also when I wanted to branch out into business, and I gave me that opportunity and allowed me to grow that way. And then, when I went over into investment banking, again, it was having, someone there who saw the value in what I was bringing to investment banking. So, the traditional investment banker is probably someone who has a business degree, undergrad, finance background. So to have a PhD scientist, something to grow, required someone who kind of had more of an open mind, because, even though I had an MBA, I hadn't worked in a finance job and didn't have that kind of training. So, with a good mentor like that, they can allow you to use your strengths, but also train you in these other things where, you want to want to grow. So that's probably a crucial guy. And also the other great thing about that mentor is that he always had, so we didn't have an open office. So I actually had a little office next to his office, but he'd always have his door open. So I could listen to all the conversations, all the clients, everything that came up and learn that way. And then he would kind of yell at me to come in whatever he needed some additional, detail on things. So that was also a great way to be exposed to a lot of different things.
Nice. So this is related. Gabriel, you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? This is sort of very related to what we're talking about.
Sure. Hi. You sort of already answered it, but I was just asking about how you found the transition from your MBA, like post-MBA, into financial investment banking. Did you find that employers were, I mean, you sort of mentioned it, but your employer was sort of interested in your PhD and scientific background, right?
Yeah.
Or was it more of a hindrance being overqualified, perhaps?
No, it's certainly not that you're overqualified, but you have your strengths, right? Which, in my case is a science. So for the whole banking group, every time, they went to speak to a new company, they'd always say, "Oh, Peng, what do you think about their science?" Like you become kind of the science guy, and you can be really pigeonholed into that area. Whereas, to be an investment banker, there's a lot of other, you have to know the finance and be able to present the company and get clients and all those kind of things. But it kind of gave me something that, that I was good at. And also when I was talking to, when we went to meet companies, I could really speak to the CEO, know what they're talking about, and be really helpful in talking about their strategy and things like that. So I think, it's just the science is a good base, but it just means that when you make the transition though, you also have to, there's a steep learning curve because you have to learn all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah.
The job. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I actually want to address Gabriel's last comment about being overqualified. So once you basically graduate with a grad degree, you're overqualified for certain jobs, such as, things that you don't need a graduate degree for. But once you're sort of at that stage where MBAs, PhDs, masters with experience, it's just like a level playing field. You're bringing new strengths, you're bringing different strengths. And I wouldn't necessarily call it overqualified. Peng brought the strength of being a scientist to the table. So you kind of have to shift the frame like that. Robbie, you want to unmute yourself, ask your question?
Oh yeah, thank you. So I was just wondering if there's anything that influenced your decision to shift from business development to investment banking.
Yeah, so when you're in business development, you're working for a company, that company might only do a few transactions, a few deals a year if you're lucky, right? So in investment banking, you're just exposed to a lot more. So early in your career, it's really important to get as much experience as possible. So in investment banking, we probably had, say, 50 different companies that I was working with at any one time. So you really get exposed to, very interesting science, different management teams, companies at different stages. You learn about all different therapeutic areas. So it's just a very, very fast-paced learning environment that I wouldn't have learned as much if I was staying in a company doing business development only for those years.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, actually, so to follow up on that, I mean, there were a couple other career options I was looking at the time that would offer you that kind of experience. And I think, management consulting is another one where you kind of go from client to client and work on different projects and learn a lot of things quickly.
So Peng, with your vast amount of experience, what would some advice you'd give to the first, second year grad student that are in the audience so that they can build their skill set for any career? And I'm assuming that most of the students that are here are kind of interested in business development, investment banking, and with a biotech lens. So what could they do now while they're in school to help prepare for a career like yours?
I think it's, No, the best advice is to remember that, well, the world's a very big place. So, your particular area of research is a very small part of that. So all of those seminars that you go to, journal clubs and presentations from your your colleagues, these special courses. That's actually the stuff that I took away from my PhD more than the area, my actual PhD thesis. And so if you go into industry or finance, it's going to be the breadth of your knowledge that's important. And of course, you can't learn everything. So it's really, what you've learned in your PhD is how to process information, analyze, and make, critical, how to interpret science and induce and things like that. So that's really what you're learning. Unless you want to be in academic science, you just want to learn and learn as much as possible and be interested in a bunch of different things.
Nice. Alexa, I want to ask your question.
Yeah, just kind of building on that, one thing that we do in Nana's course for the professional development is make plan A, B, C. And A is kind of your ideal path that you think at the moment. And then you kind of set these backup plans. And so I was wondering how much, I guess throughout your entire career, you've relied on setting very clear, 5-year plans, 10-year plans versus kind of just taking things a step at a time and seeing how you feel and just staying open-minded to different opportunities that you're not aware of at the time.
Yeah, so if you look at my career path, it is pretty so windy, and it kind of looks like I went from research to business development and companies to finance. I think so I'm definitely of the second option, right? You have to be kind of flexible and see where the opportunities are. But the underlying thing for me was to kind of always stick with science as the base, right? So everything I did was because I could continue to learn about science and be on the work with the most interesting companies, things like that. So that was always my strength, and then everything else were additional kind of skills that I built on top of that. And probably, I always did have the long-term goal of eventually being able to work in a startup and have, be in a startup where the science is amazing, but then have all of these skills. So I could build a company and take the science from the lab to patients. So how you get there again is it's really hard to map out perfectly. I would never have guessed coming out of my PhD that I would take this kind of path, but it's as long as you kind of follow your what inspires you, then it does all fit together in the end.
Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, I think the exercise you do in class is kind of tentatively plan out the A and B and C, and the word on tentatively, right? Because you never know, like Peng was saying, you never know what's going to happen, what interests you. But I think Peng's underlying, his core was that science foundation. I think that helps to kind of have a foundation, and knowing what you don't like, I think is helpful to know. And Peng, did you ever come to a point where you knew you weren't going to be an academic?
Yeah, I'm sure even towards the end of my PhD, I realized that this is not something I wanted to do forever, which is why, I actively decided I didn't want an academic postdoc. I didn't even apply for one. I wanted to be in industry. And so that was what I felt would open the path to all these things. If I'd gone straight from a PhD to, let's say, a marketing job in a company, that would have been a totally different path and put me kind of at a different level. Whereas if I went in as a scientist and then kind of chose kind of paths where the scientific background is really important, that kind of allowed me to make use of what I'd learned in the PhD.
a little bit about your current role and, maybe just a little brief overview on what you do without giving away IP.
It's
It's what you do, and how it has been, if at all, affected by the current, pandemic.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a little bit about BioAge Labs first. So it's actually a company that's founded by two U of T grads. So both the co-founders, the CEO got a PhD in Department of Medical Biophysics, and the other co-founder graduated from U of T Med School and was a pathologist at Mount Sinai for a while. So they'd met in Toronto and then ended up having to move to California in order to start this company. But they were both interested in, so BioAge is a company focused on aging, and the approach is pretty unique. They found these healthy aging cohorts. So it's these thousands of people that had entered these studies where blood was collected when they entered the study at middle age, and they were healthy people, and then their medical history was followed until their death. So some of these studies are 50 years old. So, a lot of the people, we have their full life history. And with this blood that was frozen away, we're able to do the full omics analysis using today's technology. So from kind of the GWAS, genetics, transcriptomics, proteomics, we use like an array of 5,000 proteins, and then metabolomics, we look at 10,000 metabolites. So you have all of this information in the blood at various points, and you pair it with the medical history of these people. So you know how long they lived, when they got various chronic diseases, they had cognitive and functional tests. So, when they started getting dementia, if they did, and Alzheimer's. So then it's a huge data science project to figure out what it is about their omics that leads some people to live longer and healthier, and some people to not be as lucky. And so when I joined the company, they'd done all this analysis, and we're starting to map out these pathways that are involved in aging. And so my role at the company was to figure out how to take this knowledge and actually start developing drugs that will address aging and these, specifically age-related diseases. So our focus is actually frailty, which is muscle weakness. So coincidentally, back to muscle for me, and immune aging. So elderly people, as they get older, the immune system becomes dysfunctional and they're more susceptible to infections, like COVID. So, COVID disproportionately affects more elderly people, and when elderly people get sick, they get more serious disease. So that's a classic example of how the aging of the immune system might lead to that. So because we had mapped out all of these different pathways, we could look to see what molecules are in existence that could modulate these specific pathways. And then, we have this facility of 10,000 old mice that we can test to see if our molecules work, and then they work, then we go into human clinical trials. So now we have two programs in phase 2 clinical trials, one for immune aging and one for frailty. So it was my job really to figure out how to find these molecules, what indications to go into, and then get the funding for these trials. So companies raised about 140 million now. So drug development is pretty expensive. So you have to convince investors that you've got great science and they should invest their money into your company. So I kind of, like I said, play all the roles. That it doesn't involve sitting in working with the mice, but on the business side, kind of the strategy and the financing and looking at the markets. So
Cool.
Yeah,
that's really cool stuff. And how has it been affected by COVID, if at all, your work?
Yeah, well, so, one of our lead programs is for COVID, first of all. So that was kind of, originally we were developing for immune aging, so that could be, older people get influenza and things like that. But because of this COVID issue, we're testing it in COVID. So that was one thing. But otherwise, the healthcare industry hasn't been affected that much because everyone recognizes that no matter what, you want to develop new therapies, even if it's for COVID, but for other things as well. So in the US, the labs have been open and people have been able to go in and do their experiments. So everyone else who's not in the lab is working from home, but everyone else is in the office and the companies are getting funded. And it's kind of like you're in this bubble and working away while everything is going on outside.
But for your role, you're mostly working from home.
Yeah, so I'm working from home, Zoom calls all day and things like that. Saving on travel, which is nice.
Yeah. So another question I have for you, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Yeah, so I'd love to eventually start my own company and be the CEO. So I think that's probably the 5-year plan. So this CBO role is kind of second in command and doing a lot of things and learning a lot of stuff. But probably the next role I'd like to do, take the lead.
Sebastian, you want to unmute yourself to ask your question?
Hey there. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us today. Your career path is so interesting. And I don't mean to derail really from talking about your current work, but I was just wondering a little bit about the sort of the value of a PhD versus a master's when entering investment banking or life sciences related finance. Is it substantially more valuable to have a PhD? And does this PhD sort of serve as a lubricant or a catalyst for future career growth?
Yeah, so in finance, I think so finance, you can kind of go in two directions, right? You can go into investment banking, which is, working with companies to find investors and things like that. Or you can go into venture capital where, you're part of a fund and you're actually making investments. For investment banking, I think, I don't think, you need the depth of knowledge or, the years of experience in the PhD to be an effective investment banker. I think as a master's, with a master's and industry experience and, knowledge of the industry, you'd be very well qualified to be an investment banker. In venture capital, though, I think it's different. I think everyone in venture capital either has a MD or a PhD, because it's, you really then do need the deep scientific domain expertise in order to be successful there and make the investment decisions. So I don't know if you know the difference between those, like, venture capital versus investment banking.
Yeah, I'm sort of right now, I'm in my final year of my undergrad, but I'm sort of interested in the VC side and the venture capital side, and aspect of being able to sort of invest and vet different companies. And yeah, that's what I've come across, is that it pretty much across the board, it's either MD, PhD, with a sort of a pretty profound depth of knowledge.
Yeah. In a biotech drug therapeutic focused company, firm, I think if you wanted to invest in, say, medical devices or kind of artificial intelligence for drug development, then it might be different. You don't need a PhD. You probably you need different expertise.
Thank you.
And so Sebastian's question that opens up, should you do a master's or a PhD? And I think it really just depends on who you are and what you hope to achieve during graduate school. Many of the biotech jobs, so there are only a few jobs that requires a PhD, right? A professorship, definitely. If you want to lead an industry R&D position, they probably prefer that you have a PhD, even with a bit of postdoc experience. Management consulting, they have a different PhD cohort that's different from the master's and the undergrad cohort. Medical affairs, they're asking for more PhDs now. And just as Peng mentioned, those was it venture VCs, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, venture. So because you need that in-depth knowledge. Now, if you don't want to be in any of those, I think 5 categories, a master's is fine with experience, right? It's the experience that counts. If you have a master's, you have 2 years working experience, then you get an MBA, you're kind of doing the same business development kind of thing. And even without an MBA, I've heard of people jumping in there as well. So depends who you are and depends how you grow during graduate school. So that's
Yeah, that's a really good point. There's there's really good, science focus. If you like science and you want to stay in science, there's really great science jobs in industry that don't require a PhD. Even marketing, it requires science because you have to understand how the drug works and, how to talk to physicians and things like that. Clinical trials, actually, that can be something that you could do with a master's and run clinical trials. So anyway, there's a long list probably.
Caitlin, do you want to unmute yourself to ask your question?
Sure. Hi there. Thanks so much. You had a really interesting career path. It's really fascinating to see how someone's able to transition to different career paths. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on your experience applying for jobs in the US. So specifically how you went about reaching out to employers, whether it was via LinkedIn, and because it was in the US, were you able to have informational interviews with employees of the companies you were interested in to kind of gauge what the work environment was like, since because of the distance, you maybe might not be able to get out there to see what it was like?
Yeah, so the good thing about Canada is there's still it was NAFTA at the time, whatever it's called now, that, with a degree in biochemistry or a PhD, companies can hire you just, you have a job offer and you go to the border and you automatically can enter the country and start working. So theoretically, it should not be a hurdle to work in the US. Practically though, a lot of companies now do prefer to hire, US citizens or people with green cards. So, it is something that you have to navigate. Regards to LinkedIn, it is all about connections, right? So I think the more chances you have to network with people and get introductions, that'll help a lot more than just making a cold call, even on LinkedIn. So all the people that Nana brings in to talk to you, I mean, any of you are welcome to reach out to me. If you see someone I'm connected to on LinkedIn, I'm happy to make introductions if I can.
What I'd like to do, and Alexa, I'll hold your question. What I'd like to do is kind of have Peng tell us that, the 1 or 2 piece of advice he wishes to everyone. And then I'm going to close the recording and then we're going to open it up for a more open, you can open up your videos to talk to Peng. So to our friends watching via video later on, Peng, do you have any closing statements for them? Advice?
I would just say that you guys are all very lucky. You're working, it's such an exciting time for medical research. There are so many fields that are just exploding. So, things like artificial intelligence being applied to drug development, microbiome, cell therapy is like this thing that could cure all diseases, and even aging that I'm working with. So, it's just a great time to be in science. I would just, persevere with your grad studies. And I know that's probably my second bit of advice. And there are so many times when I wanted to give up, but it's really worth it. So that's, persevere, get through it. It'll teach you. And after this, everything will be easy compared to getting through grad school. So just enjoy your time, and it's got a great future ahead of you.
Great, thanks for those wise words. Things will get easier, everyone. This is your hardest time. So thank you, Peng, and for all those of you at home. I'll see you for the next video. Bye for now.
Bye, everyone.